Hello, everybody. Today's episode is a little different because I interviewed a children's author, and I was yet to have any author on my show, so it's a pleasure to have Jason Jennings on. And if you aren't a member of my Patreon yet, you can start today with a free trial so you can see what exclusive content is awaiting you. I keep my Patreon members first in line when it comes to anything, so if you like the show and my work, I'd be delighted for you to join. And of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave a comment. And follow me on Instagram and TikTok if you so desire. Okay, cheers. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here with Jason Jennings, author of the Diddle Dillup Frogs Adventure series. Pleasure to have you on, Jason.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. I've never had an author on my show before, so you'll be the first one. So, first, first maybe can you talk about what your book series is about,
Sure,
perhaps?
sure. My first book, they're each a little different. In my first book, bass and frogs are themed as enemies. These two are outcasts and form an unlikely friendship. A short version of the teacher review is about a group of unlikely friends who prove to others that it's not a matter of who you are, but what you make of yourself that is important. And just for clarity, the illustrations and text are on separate pages, and it's being loved by all ages and all walks of life, and even used from daycare through college. So,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the first book, when when peace does come to the lake, the frog grows restless, so he journeys on to land in search of new adventures. He never goes back. So all of the characters in the sequel are brand new.
Mm-mm. Okay,
Um,
yeah. So I think I got that mixed up before, which one was first, but I thought this was the first one, I guess, but it's not. Yeah, so it's the second one. Maybe we should probably say too that how we kind of got got acquainted with each other, I guess was it was over TikTok that I came across your page, and uh yeah, and there was something just unique about your book that I liked. Like when I think I came across you reading a page or something of it. Um and then we started talking to each other about possibly doing an episode together. Um so I just wanted to tell that to the audience. Yeah, they're great books, and you mentioned before that you plan on making it a five-book series. How'd that come to be, that idea of making this book a five-book series?
okay, well, let's start with the first one. Um, the first book was never intended to become a book. My father made up stories for me when I was a kid. He's actually an unknown figure, or was. His name was Max Jennings. He was former editor of the Dayton Daily News in Dayton, Ohio. So people can search him, reference who he was and his accomplishments. When I was a kid, he made up stories for me. He never read them to me from a book, but he also never wrote them down. After he passed, his stories went with him. So when I wanted to reminisce, I didn't have, I lost a lot of memories from my childhood. The only things I could remember are the names of A Bass and A Frog. I don't know if they were in the same books or not. So one day I just wrote down their names and started making up my own stories using their names, but I was just reminiscing. I was not planning a book. Over the years, as you can imagine, it added up, and people saw it and people liked it and encouraged me to turn it into a book. I didn't, I wasn't impressed with my own writing, you know. I
Mm.
didn't think it was nearly as great as people think it is now. Um, and I put it out as I self-published on Barnes and Noble originally, and I did it as sort of an homage to my father, more than something I actually expected to, manifest into something more. Now,
Mm.
I had written more than I used in my book. So some of the sequel was actually already written. I just didn't use it in making the first book. And I was hoping maybe I'd sell 50 copies. And if I did, or less, something like that, there would be no more books. It would just be the one. On Barnes and Noble, this went and made number one kids and number six all books for 3 days. And then number two kids books and number 39 all books for 3 days, which is approximately 400,000 copies in 6 days. And you can
Mm.
imagine it was an amazing feeling. It just, I kept telling my wife, pinch me, I'm dreaming, pinch me, I'm dreaming. And eventually she smacked me. And I said, what was that for? And she said, that should last a few pinches. So it was an adorable moment. Um, Barnes does not play nice. So we are not there anymore. If you sell a lot of copies, they will underreport your numbers to you, insist you sold less so they can keep your royalties. It is not the entire corporation, it's just the top few. So, can't go after them, entire legal department, all that. So, not worried about it. Eventually, that will come to, that time will come. So what I'm going to do is I'm working my way on back towards the top. I got to the top before with no advertising and no publicity. So I have no doubt that I will eventually get there again. I just need enough attention, maybe eventually some advertising, hopefully an investor or a publisher who starts to see what this is capable of.
Mm. Mm.
And that's my
Yeah.
focus.
Okay. Yeah, so it's interesting, yes, that so those names like well like Diddle Dillup um come from your father's is that your name that you came up with, or did your father come up with that?
Sort of both. So,
Mm.
my father had a slightly different name for the frog. He did name the bass. The bass, his bass was named Monzo, so I kept that. The frog had a very similar name, but no one can make it sound right. I wasn't happy with the way it sounded when anybody else tried to say it, including myself. So I felt like I needed to. People were confused about even how to say it. So I felt like it needed something more clear. I felt like people would enjoy reading it more if there was a word that was easier to pronounce and understand, yeah, than a made up word.
Mm. Right.
I took a survey. I surveyed just people that I knew, people I encountered. I surveyed plus people on Facebook and other social media. I surveyed approximately 300 people ish.
Mm.
And of the names that I had come up with, I don't remember what they all were, but there were around 15 names, possible names. And Diddle was one of those names. And overwhelmingly, among teachers, among parents, among people of different walks, among first responders, among pretty much everybody. The name Diddle won out, and that's how it came to be the first name. The second name was part of the name. The Dillup was part of the name. That my father's name for the frog was one word, but like complicated, a word similar to Diddle. I don't want to say what it was. I want to trademark that someday, protect that, keep people from taking that.
Right,
But
right.
it was similar. And like I said, over 300 people, the name Diddle was almost unanimous among all the different choices.
Mm-mm-mm. What made you want to reminisce though about you and your father or your father's stories that he told you?
Because um, I don't have, uh, I hit my head very hard and got a TBI long time ago, and I lost a lot of my memories.
Mm,
So I just don't have a whole lot of memories that I used to have, not nearly as many, a few here and there. So reminiscing, and I was, for a while, I was effectively unable to access photos and old VHS tapes and things like that. They were cut off from me for a long time. So I just didn't have much to look at him or to, and then some of the stuff I did have, some of the photos I did have were in a tote bin of mine that was essentially stolen from me.
mm,
Yeah, that was unfortunate. And, they didn't care about, the sentiment. It's not the point. Point is, I didn't have a lot on which to reminisce about him. I didn't have possessions and I barely had any pictures. And my father loved telling stories. He was always really fond of telling stories, stories about his life, stories about places he had been. He really did lead a remarkable life. And so, while I can't remember his stories, I kind of remember the feeling. So I was
mm,
just kind of trying to recapture that feeling.
mm.
It's one of the few things I can remember vividly, not the stories, but sort of the feeling when he would take the time to make up these stories for me. They just made me so happy when I was a kid. And I would always, even as I got older, I think I kept wanting these stories, even when I would eventually be up and not in bed and still get him to tell me a story. I think he'd even like maybe 7 or 8 years old, you
Mm.
know, just turn off the TV and he'd tell me a story there before bed, before I went off to go to bed. So, and later as I got older, in my 20s and 30s, I kept asking him to write them down before, it was too late. And he kept saying no. He would say, he'd call me Jace sometimes. He'd say, no, Jace, I made those stories for you. I will tell you some more. I'll make up some more for you if you want, but it's up to you to write them down because you're the one that I made them up for. And I never did. And when he passed, my chance to do that was gone. So, better to make up my own than to just let it go away altogether. I
Right.
guess maybe I was hoping that through reading mine, that maybe some people in the future parts of the family might at least get a sense of what his stories might have been like, kind of.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Okay. Uh, and what pursued you to I guess essentially self publish them?
Well, the same thing. I wanted to put the book out there as sort of an homage to him. And I sent the manuscript off to publishers. Don't want you to send them the whole book, which I think is weird. I mean, why not? Right? They don't have to read the whole book. They want instead for you to send them a summary, which is supposed to be a specific amount of pages and things. It's just weird. So
Mm,
I came up with said summary. I sent it off to all the kids' book publishers I could find, and they all turned it down. So self-publishing through either Barnes and Noble or Amazon was really the only option I had left that I could afford. You can have books printed through some companies, and they don't charge you anything up front, like print on demand, but they charge you a warehouse fee every month for all the copies of your books that haven't sold. So if you had 1,000 printed, great, you had 1,000 printed and didn't, you only have to pay their percentage per book. But if you only sell a few copies, you're stuck paying that storage fee for years or until you can buy your books from them, having to buy your own books essentially.
Yeah.
So I decided I didn't want to risk that or take that kind of chance. Someone told me about them doing that, and I thought that didn't sound like a good idea. So print to order just made more sense. Amazon did not make this size and shape of a book. They only make books that are the taller version. They don't make at least on their print on demand for a hardcover, they did not make this size and shape of a book. So in order to get the size and shape of a book made, Barnes & Noble was my only choice. So that's how we started. And then I had some inheritance that came in from someone in the family passing. And it wasn't enough to make me rich or anything, but it did allow me to afford to have the sequel made. And I had gotten a loan that I over time paid back to have the first made. And then I had an inheritance that helped me have the sequel made. And now where I'm at is I have to sell enough of these to then be able to afford to make the third one. I don't expect more inheritances or more anything like that. So now it's a matter of there will be no more. I'm writing the third one. It's being written.
Yeah.
And when money, if I sell enough of these, that would be the ideal way, yeah. Or if I get an investor or a publisher, then the rest will come out and that won't be a problem. But if it's on my own, then I just need these all to sell. I've had 1,000 of each printed. I've sold about 300 of the first one since selling them on my own, maybe 350. And I've sold more than 100 of the sequel. But selling on your own is difficult because you see on Barnes & Noble, you can search books by 5 stars and only see 5-star books. Amazon does not allow you to do that. On Amazon, they only let you search 4 stars and up. So if your book is 5-star like mine, that's great. On Barnes & Noble, it'll help it stand out. However, so Frog's book's 5 stars, that'll pop right up. On Amazon, it will not, because your book gets flooded with a swamp of 4 stars, 4.1 stars, 4.2 stars, or swamp is not the right word, an ocean. You know what I mean? I wasn't trying to be insulting. Your book gets drowned out by an ocean of 4.4 star and up books. So tens of thousands of books are 4 stars and up, if not hundreds of thousands. So your book, unless you sell like 10,000 in a day, your book probably won't even make the top 100. And I don't know if you've been on Amazon and just looked, but you cannot go past 100 without doing a specific search for a book or subcategories, etc. So you will not find this on Amazon. You will, but not unless you specifically search the names. The Diddle Dillup Frog's Adventures. So that's why Amazon is harder. On Barnes, it's easier. And Barnes customers are more picky about reviews.
Yeah, right.
So when a book is 5 stars on Barnes, and only 5 stars, when you have more than 300 reviews, which is what it has when it was still there, it had more than 300 5-star reviews. On a place like Barnes & Noble, that's amazing. It doesn't get much better than that, to have that many all 5-star, no 1-star, no 2 stars, no 3, no 4, just 5 stars across the board.
Yeah.
So there it was easy. On Amazon, because of that ocean and the ratings don't matter as much, it just gets drowned out. So we also have a website now, diddledillup.net.
Hmm.
But getting the amount of attention just isn't as easy anywhere else as it was
Right.
on. So since Barnes did what they did, since they were withholding my royalties from me, I had to leave there. But then they did something worse, which is they ghosted me. So every trace of my book, the fact that it used to be on Barnes, is gone. Those more than 300 five-star reviews, those are gone.
Hmm.
And now they won't talk to me. They won't return emails. They won't reply to me. I pressed and pressed, trying to get reasonable answers and explanations about how I can be bestseller and at the same time sell almost no books, sell maybe 200, and they eventually just blacklisted me, ghosted me. So, which is just all the more proof of what they did. I have their emails, but it's not a matter of going after them. What it's a matter of for me is getting back to the top. I was at the top before. That's why I'm so confident I will get there again. And as far as them, who cares? If I get back to the top and stay there, what happened with them will be irrelevant, except for the fact that what I accomplished there gave me the encouragement, yeah, the motivation and the belief. And then the
Yeah.
fan following has been surreal. The amount of love and support that has been shown to me by the fans I have on TikTok, it's just,
Yeah.
it's dreamy.
Right. Right. Yeah. Uh. With like, I mean, well, I know you've said before that your books are all ages books. Um, but also like, I don't know, what would you call it? Like it's like all age children's literature or
Something like that, yes.
yeah.
I typically, I don't know what the proper term to use would be. My book doesn't tend to follow proper terms at all, so I don't feel
Hmm.
the need to use any. I usually refer to them as all ages kids books. I mean, they're cartoony, right? And they're not anime, which is sometimes for adults, right? So these aren't anime, um, but they are certainly very cartoony, and they are
Right.
very kid-friendly themes. But when you have all four branches of active duty military and veterans from each of those, and doctors and lawyers and accountants and janitors and bartenders, Uber drivers, DoorDash drivers, convenience store clerks, first responders, police, firefighters, when you have all the immigrants from all countries over the world, immigrants from Eastern Europe, immigrants from Western Europe, immigrants from Africa, immigrants from the Middle East, from South America, when you have all of these diverse walks of life, people from all religions
Yeah.
are loving these. I've had people in my lives, I've seen conversations taking place between others. This one conversation, a sub conversation, not
Hmm.
about me, between some Muslims, some Jewish people, and some Christians. And the Christians were curious about what they had in common, more in terms of what they had in common, because there's no religion or politics in my life. And so those are the two most divisive topics on the planet. They
Yeah.
divide, led to wars, they lead to all kinds of human suffering. There's nothing more divisive. When you remove that, suddenly everybody can get along. So my books are completely void of that. There's no gender issues, there's no race or species issues, except for the fact that, for example, these two in the first book were outcasts.
Right.
They were considered the least important, not because of how they looked, not because of the species they were, but just because their personalities didn't match what was the norm or what was considered popular with the others. More that kind of niche.
Yeah.
And as this goes forward, now he's no longer an outcast anymore going into the sequel, but he is still a rather unusual frog. His experiences have helped mold him, and emotionally, mentally, he's kind of a unique little, a more unique character compared to, say, most frogs that are out there. And others, as he shares his stories, others find his stories inspiring or, at the very least, come to either admire or at least appreciate him along the way. And something I'm really happy about in the sequel, my frog does not walk like a person. It is such a cheap shortcut to have your frog walk like a person.
Yeah.
If it's a sci-fi movie, cool. If it's an action movie where they have the ability to transform and do that, that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it's just a regular frog and all of a sudden they start walking like a person and acting like a person, don't get me wrong, for the authors that have had success with that, that's fine. But for me, it drives me nuts. So it seemed easy to me to come up with the idea that he would get rides because let's face it, we've all seen videos. We've seen cats riding on horses, right? I don't know if you've seen
Mhm.
that either. We've seen all different kinds of animals riding on each other, right? So why can't he get rides on some of the animals he encounters along the way? So he can still travel far, a lot further than he could if he was hopping, but without walking like a person.
Yeah, yeah.
And by getting animals, how will he know where to go? How will he know which ways the adventures are, the new encounters are? These animals carrying him, they know that, right?
Mm-mm. Yeah.
So, and another thing, a lot of kids' books, they sort of go all over the place, right? Mine follows a theme, follows stories. Mine's a chapter book, and one thing leads to the next and the next, but nothing repeats itself. I'm very proud about that, and that each character has a different personality than the others.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I'm really happy with how that came to be. And did you see the fan art in the back 2 pages of the sequel?
Um,
The
the like
last,
the empty page.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the page before that gave instructions, and so there's a glossy page and a plain paper page. So people who buy this are going to be able to create fan art. They have their choice of which type of paper they want, right?
Mhm.
Different people may have a different preference. So when I get 100 or more fan art submissions, we're going to have a talent show. Rounds of voting. There will be prizes.
Nice.
That's very interactive. I don't know of that in another book. I thought of it last second. I hate having empty pages that are just there for reasons I never understood. So I was trying to think of a way to fill them, and
Yeah.
it took me a while, but once it did click, yes. And since then, everybody seems excited for it.
Mm. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, um there seems to be, I mean, in both books so far, there seems to be well, themes of overcoming something. So, I was wondering if you could maybe delve a little into that.
Um, every person, when we're kids, we're all told that everybody's unique, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's genetically, that's true. And even socially. I mean, You can look back to a movie like in early 80s, there was that movie called The Breakfast Club. A
Yeah.
lot of people may not know that movie because it's much older for them. If you don't, I suggest you check it out. There's always been different subsections of society. There's always been people we often refer to as the nerds or the geeks. There's the jocks, the athletics, right? The machos. We've got the bad boys, right, so to speak, the tough guy, bad guy, rebel without a clue.
Yeah.
Instead of rebel without a cause, more like we've got those. Right? There's so many walks of life, right? And every generation has that same the cool kids, right? The rich kids or the ones who just are super popular, right? Every generation, everyone never fails to have all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And everyone has loners, has people who are, for one reason or another, even if there's really nothing wrong with them per se, find themselves alone or less appreciated. Yeah.
Mm,
We've all either been that or have known someone who was that. Yeah. You've known
for sure.
some loners, right? Did you not when you were in
For sure.
school? Everybody has known a loner at some point in their life. What's the difference between being a loner and an outcast? Loners are not usually welcome at the big social events that all the others are. What's really and they just don't usually have a lot of people to, whether it's to have a meal with or to hang out with or go do fun things with. That's why they're called loners. Yeah. So um, uh, so what's the difference between being a loner and being an outcast? Now, as far as it's not just that these are different, but it's also that the differences can actually help them fix things or overcome things that no one else can. Bass and frogs have been themed as enemies so long that no one even remembers why they became enemies in the first place.
Mm,
So, how do you overcome that? Normal frogs and normal bass don't. These two do. And they do it mostly just by being themselves. Did you know, Patrick, that some of the most famous mathematicians, I can't do complex math. I just can't. I try and I try. I can't grasp it. I wanted to become a psychologist. Could not handle the math to do it, even though the math is absolutely useless to
right, right, right.
mental health. Maybe if you're using medication, but I wanted to be a psychologist, so no medicine in that. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
autistic people primarily were who created the forms of math we use today. Some of the most famous mathematicians were autistic. We look at things written about them by their peers, by their colleagues, about them in general, um, things written about them either at the time when they were still alive or decades later or hundreds of years later when people used to look towards the painter, right, to have their picture painted, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if you were looking down this way all the time, that's how they would paint you, right? They would paint you as you were presenting yourself to them, yeah. And you can see in their portraits, they're always avoiding eye contact. They're never looking true to being autistic and reading the descriptions of them and what they were like and what their personalities were like. It's
Yeah.
basically textbook autism. That autism allowed them to think in ways that no one else could think.
Mm, mm, mm.
If I can't handle math, imagine how much smarter you have to be even to then invent math. So
Right, right.
if autistic people can invent math, then it just makes sense that things that make characters unusual in terms of qualities might allow them to overcome things that that others have not.
Yeah. Right, right.
We've all known people like that. And so when I started writing, I was just writing to reminisce. I was not intending morals. I was not intending lessons. I was not intending this to be used in schools or any of it. None of this was my intention. I was never expecting it to be a hit at all. I was hoping maybe, because I had a small following, maybe I might sell 50 copies. Maybe. That
Mm,
was that
yeah.
was the height of my ambition. I published it more as self-published it as an homage to my father, not expecting to become an author, not expecting not expecting any of this. Um, and it's just been overwhelming. I have fans, and I kept telling people I don't have fans, and they're like, "What do you think we are?" And I'm like, "Oh, that made me feel bad." And then I'm not a celebrity. Guys, stop it. And they're like, how many people, how many fans do you have before you are a celebrity?
Mm.
And there's not really a specific number. So, and then more importantly, came this question from someone, I can't remember who. They said, if you are a celebrity in the eyes of hundreds of people or even thousands, then who are you to say you are not a celebrity?
Yeah, very true. Um, yeah, very true. So so excuse me. Um, yeah, I kind of wanted to ask about Frog and Toad, the book, because we talked about that for a second before, and yeah, and I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to maybe juxtapose that because that's a very popular book,
It,
children's book.
it's a terrible book. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great if you want to raise a bunch of serial killers. He's eating baby frogs. First, he abducts them, then he taunts them, scares them, freaks them out, then eats them. And then when he gets full, he says he will do 100 jumping jacks because he's too full. And 100 jumping jacks I will do, and then I will eat you too. Who says that? That's a kid's book, and when I look at the illustrations, the grainy, it's bleh. I would not use those illustrations if they were free.
Hmm.
Does that mean they are bad illustrations? No. We all have, right, our tastes, our preferences. I'm saying for me, you've seen the frog and toad illustrations, right?
Yeah.
And then you see illustrations like this, yeah? And there's no comparison, is there? There's the grainy, there's the. Now, some people like the grainy. It's not grainy, is not the right word. Like a rough finish. Some people really like that kind of finish. Let me give some credit to the author of Frog and Toad and to the illustrator. If they are different people, I don't know. I am not sitting here trying to diminish their work or them as an author or an illustrator. They've created a popular kids book. Good for them. I wish them nothing but, continued success. I'm not really trying to trash talk them.
Right, right, right.
I'm just saying that I feel like making a comparison between my books and that book because they are so very different. The type of story is different. They
Hmm.
follow a conventional writing style. So it's interesting. Something I've learned, Patrick, is that the creative writing classes for each category of book, for example, horror, comedy, kids' books, sci fi, what have you, there's basically 4 or 5 official writing styles for each of those. They want you to pick one and stick to it.
Yeah.
Now, now, if Frog and Toad kind of sound the same book after book, well, if you're sticking to one writing style, Can you imagine if you applied that to music?
Mm.
Can you imagine
I mean,
if
people
if,
do, but yeah.
no, they don't. Zeppelin, Elvis, Ray Charles, B.B. King, doesn't matter what kind of music you like, Eminem, hip hop artists, Dr. Dre, Ozzy Osbourne, Aerosmith, Jelly Roll. If they followed music school, they would never have written anything they wrote, ever. None of it. Mozart, there wasn't as much in the way of official music school back in their day, but Mozart and Beethoven, to the extent that there were proper music styles, they did not follow them because
Mm.
every song would sound, almost every song out there would sound the same. They wanted to
Right.
create art, right? They wanted to create music, right? Things that they felt, things that came from feeling, right? And inspiration, not things that came from what was considered proper. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of like a thing about uh genres, I think, where uh it's I mean, in a way I kind of think genres don't really, I mean, in case of like all art really that doesn't make too much sense because um I mean, you mentioned Mozart, Beethoven, like they sure, yeah, they did stick out from everyone else in the time period that they lived in.
The only reason
Um
they know who they are.
right, exactly. But also they stuck to some of their tools, I guess, for the
Well,
duration of their careers.
they had to.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
they didn't have access to what artists had 100 years or 200 years later.
Right. But it's not even a question of that really, but it like that um they could have like I guess my point is that they didn't really switch didn't really switch styles from piece to piece, but switch like um you know they I don't know what's a good way of putting this that they stuck to their own their own
Style.
style
Yeah. I
and
didn't say they didn't. They didn't. All right. There's a
uh
difference between doing things the same way and having a style. It's not the same thing. Let me give you an example. Um, Jimi Hendrix. Yeah.
yeah.
He had a lot of different songs, right? Ton of songs. They were, if I remember right, didn't he play his guitar upside down because they didn't make left-handed guitars when he first started playing?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, so he had a different sound, right? A different style. So through his sense of style, right? Through his sense of of expression and of creativity, he put out all those songs. Now, are all those songs the same?
No.
Okay, but technically they're all the same style.
Right.
So there's a difference between repetition because the songs are not all the same, right? They have different sounds, right? Different themes, right? Different things they're expressing,
Yeah.
but at the same time, they're coming from the same person who's still producing rock and roll, right? And the rock and roll in that period, the type of rock and roll in that period that he was interested in creating. So sticking to a style does not necessarily mean you're repeating yourself. What I mean by repeating yourself
Mm.
in books or in style of writing, creative writing doesn't actually teach creativity. It's an oxymoron. You cannot teach
Yeah, right.
creativity. You have it or you don't. Every single person, in my opinion, in the world has creativity, but oftentimes in different forms, in different shapes. Some people are creative and just haven't found it yet. Some people have been creative in some way all along and it just never dawned on them, hey, I do this better because of the way I'm doing it. And that came from creativity, perhaps. If it wasn't what they were shown, then it came to them somehow. If not by being shown, then by creativity. Creativity can apply to plumbing. It can apply to being an electrician. It can apply to working to cooking. Creativity can come in many forms. It doesn't just refer to art. Anytime that something naturally occurs to you that you could do differently to improve things, what is that if not creativity?
Right. Right.
So, when I say the same style, I'm not saying every Frog and Toad book is the same. I have not read every Frog and Toad book. Even if I had, I'm sure there are differences. What I meant by the same is if you stick to a style of writing and only one style, and you limit yourself specifically to that style of writing, is that creative? Or is that using a style that someone else already established? You still have to be, now let me give credit to the author and the illustrator of Frog and Toad. They also get credit at the same time. The concept of Frog and Toad was a different concept. And while I like to make a joke, yeah, if you want to raise serial killers, that was meant in jest. That was a joke. The author of Frog and Toad and the illustrator, I'm a veteran, forgive me, we just have a funny and wacky and rather different sense of humor in life sometimes. I mean, disrespect. Veterans and active duty military, most times in most population, right? People talk nicely to you and talk bad behind your back, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Veterans, and
Yeah.
military, we do the opposite.
Mhm.
We say the worst things we can think of to your face. And then behind your back, we say nice things if we like you. And if we say
Right.
nice things to your face, sometimes it means we don't like you. Now that's in the military. When we transition out becoming veterans, we sort of do some of both, and people can't tell where we're coming and going. So, to the author,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the illustrator of Frog and Toad, I give you props. You've created something that people like, that people enjoy, and that's fantastic. And so props to them. I don't say these things to insult them. What I'm trying to say is that I don't stick to a writing style. I did not take creative writing classes to conform to a style. My story is somewhat, maybe a little bit of how you would normally write a book, but it is also in many parts of it more the way that you would see a story portrayed in a movie
Mm.
versus a book, or in a way
Yeah.
that you would hear someone telling you the story as if they were speaking it to you, as opposed to reading it to you or writing it for you.
Right. Yeah. That comes across.
So when you're reading my book and you say you feel like it's a different kind of a read, and the writing style changes in my book. Now, I hired a book critic to review my book, and he criticized it partly for the fact that the writing style is changing, would change throughout the book. And he said that can confuse readers. Here's the thing, not one person, not one, has expressed any sort of confusion at all. Not when it was on Barnes and Noble and sold hundreds of thousands, not now that it's on Amazon, not through my website, not on TikTok shop. Nowhere has anybody expressed any confusion at all with any single part of it. So the idea that it could, well, whether
Mm.
it could or not, it's not. Nobody is confused by it. Nobody, in fact, teachers are loving this. Teachers are using this a lot. They're using this in daycare, pre-K, K, all levels of elementary school and college. College philosophy and psychology classes don't think it's confusing. First grade, second grade, pre-K, K, daycare, they don't think it's confusing. So to the book critics out there that say you have to have one style or it's confusing, well, No one else is confused. The literary world
Yeah.
doesn't approve of my books. And what I mean by that is publishers and agents and things like that, because I don't stick to the styles that they are used to. And they don't like my illustrator because her style is so zoomed in. You don't have to see the whole deer. If you're focused on showing the entire deer, right, you will miss some of the details that are more important. You would not see nearly as much of the frog, right?
Yeah,
And it
right.
would be so tiny that from this angle, you couldn't you couldn't see enough detail of him, right, to appreciate his expression, right? It's like, right? You wouldn't be able to get
Yeah, yeah.
that zoom, but they want to change that. I talked to two publishers and one agent, and they all wanted to change that. People love hundreds of thousands of copies. Tell you how much people love these illustrations, but it raises the bar. They don't. I got calls
Mm.
by individuals working for places encouraging me, and emails as well, encouraging me to not let anybody talk me into changing things. I was told the reason they want to change things is they have authors, right? The publishers have authors they work with that will put out consistently 10, 15, however many books a year, and they can put it out every year, right? Produce the same amount of books.
Oh,
And they have a comparable standard for their authors in kids' books and a comparable standard for their authors in science, sci-fi, or whatever the genres are, right? And so they don't want anything that raises the bar because
mm.
then because if they start paying me more because my books are way outselling the others are going to want more. They're going to want to sell more copies. And they're going to be complaining to the publisher. Oh, this is according to people who work in the industry, not me. I don't know. This is what I'm being told.
Mm.
They they don't want those people to then start making better books because if they make better books, that takes longer. That takes a lot longer. And therefore, they don't make as many within the course of a year. And
Mm.
therefore, the publisher may make less money because less copies are sold. So they would rather put out lower quality books. The publishers would, I'm not saying the authors. The publishers would rather put out a larger quantity of lower quality books because it's easier and people are going to keep buying books regardless of the quality. Because if the quality across the board is comparable, right?
Yeah.
Then now I'm not saying that all these books are bad. Let me clear this up because that may come across wrong. Some of these books may be great and they might all be the same great qualities. Some rounds of books might not be so great and they'll all be a comparable quality. My point is they want the quality to be comparable. And even other publishers want the same thing
Mm.
until a breakout story comes along. But to them, the only thing breakout is a concept. The
Yeah.
concept can be breakout, but they want a similar style of writing. They want their books to have one style of writing that it conforms to. And if it
Mm.
doesn't, they don't like it and they will want to change it. So I've had two publishers and one agent. Neither of them offered any money. They wanted the rights to my books. And what I'm told by that is if they're not willing to give you money, then it's often a trap. If
Yeah.
they get the rights to your books, they can put your book to the side and never touch it again. You cannot continue with it because they own the rights now. And
Mm.
so your book is effectively buried.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
or they can just lose interest and focus on other things. They haven't spent any money, haven't invested money in fronting you money that now they need to make it back. So
Yeah.
Now, I've had an investor come into my life saying they wanted to buy the rights to my book for 100,000. No. Another one saying 550,000. No. Why? Because actuarial science supposedly says that's crazy that someone used something that complicated to try and make a predictive model for my books. But they've estimated that my books, if all five come out, not just these two, and if the right kinds of advertising are purchased and done, and the right kind of publicity is garnered, right? Interviews, book tours, right, etc. And the right things are done in the right way, then the conservative number for projected numbers of sales between across all five books, not each of the five, all five put together, I'm told a conservative number of expected sale copies to be sold is 200 million. This is based in part on the fact that with no advertising, no publicity, nothing, no representation, I sold approximately 400,000 copies in 6 days on Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. Right.
So with advertising and with publicity, instead of making number six all books, I might have made number one. And more importantly, I might have stayed there.
Mm.
So I am advised to hold out for a few million and to keep at least 3 to 5% of my rights. So do you know how that works?
Um, not with books, but
Okay,
yeah.
probably similar. Um, so apparently, if you sell your rights, like all your rights except for maybe 3%, right? And they give you, let's say, $10 million, right? Example. They make back their 10 million, then they make 10 million in profit. Now it's all written out in a contract. It might say they make 100 million, whatever the contract says, whatever you negotiate. And then after that point, then you start getting 3% or 5%, whatever your negotiated percentage is of all the profits going forward. So
Yeah.
now if they invest 10 million in me and right, they give me 10 million, they buy all the rights except for say 3% maybe, right? And the books do go on to sell 2 billion or 200 million copies. And they make an average of $10 a copy after all the expenses and advertising and everything it's paid for. That's $2 billion. You'll be really glad you kept your 3%, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about movie rights? If you don't keep any of your movie rights, and the movies, and they do end up being, and it does end up generating movies, and those movies go on to make billions, you'll be really happy you kept your 3% for movies, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I mean, 3 to 5% plus 10 million. Now, does that mean I'm going to hold firm for 10 million? No. But that you've got to negotiate from some point, right?
Mm.
So my offer to start a negotiation for any investors or publishers watching this, I'm offering 10 million plus 5%, and you have all the rights to potentially conservatively $2 billion book franchise, not counting movies and merch. That's my initial offer. They are welcome to, negotiate it with me. But that's how I start the offer.
Mm-mm-mm. Yeah.
It,
Uh-huh.
it's surreal, Patrick. It's just to be here in this moment, to have been bestseller at all, like ever. I didn't even intend to become an author, and I made bestseller. That's like becoming a rock star by accident or something to that
Yeah,
extent
right.
by accident. You just and the fan base we have on TikTok is only going to keep growing. And as when that gets higher, I'm sure eventually my base on other social media will start growing, and that will be awesome. I'm already working on a meet and greet in Tempe, Arizona that will probably be sometime this coming spring. I don't have a date yet. Anytime between March through May. We'll
Mm.
see. Um, there's only something like 12 people set to show up for the time being, but I expect that there's a lot of time between now and then. Not only am I making new fans, but there's a lot of existing fans who haven't seen the post yet. So
Right,
I
right.
expect that number will climb to 30, and that's now. Can you imagine when my following is twice as big and
Mm-hmm.
3 times as big and 5 times as big? So, you know, one thing on top of the other.
Right, right.
So, all due respect to Frog and Toad, all due respect to all the other books out there, I don't think I'm not really trying to belittle their books. What I'm trying to say is my books and their books could not, in spite of having frogs, they could not be much more different. They are
Mm.
very, very. You've read my books,
Yep.
and have you read Frog and Toad, or you just know of
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Okay. Did they sound at all the same?
No, I wouldn't say so.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
So that doesn't mean that Frog and Toad is bad. It's been a successful book franchise, or is it a franchise? I think.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
And I say good for them. I say congratulations. I don't mean to just that how different it bothers me when when people see my books and they see a book that's 100% different.
Yeah, right.
The illustrations could not be more different. The style of writing could not be, whether it's better or worse. Some people, I'm sure, will like Frog and Toad more than my book.
Mm.
But my book did make number one on Barnes and Noble,
Yeah, I mean, I think those people,
and then number two on Barnes and Noble. And Frog and Toad was not in the top 10 at the time.
yeah, I think those people though just see that there's a frog as the main character and kind of sum it up as that.
Yeah, that mean I can see that.
But yeah, I wanted to ask you too that how do you or do you even think about this, I guess, like just writing for well um I guess like having a lesson or something within a chapter because there seems to be like some seems to be almost in like maybe not every chapter but um yeah that there is some lesson in it or there's like an overall kind of message to the book. Um do you think about what a message within like a chapter is going to be, or is it more so just thinking about the story and seeing what comes out of that? Like,
Um, I just think about the story and I don't plan a lesson. I don't think of a lesson. Now, when as I'm writing the story, when I get the story mostly written, I then go back through. Some of the things I've written repeat themselves. And I told you never, no repeats in my book, right? So I edit those out, right? I revise those, change those, make sure that the same characters don't do the same exact thing, in different scenes. Um,
yeah.
ADD can make it challenging at times. Um, but also sometimes ADD helps my creativity because the having your thoughts go in different directions. Sometimes you write down three different thoughts, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's even a combination of all three that end up vibing and working out. Anyway, the point
Hmm.
is, I don't sit down and I don't plan.
Yeah.
Just start writing, or when my hands are too shaky, I actually do a lot of talk to text in
Mm.
my phone. like to a Microsoft Word on my phone. I'll do talk to text a lot of times. And so I'll actually write a lot of my story talk to text. And then when my hands are steady enough to type, I do like writing. I like typing out the words. My hands are too shaky. I can't hold a pen and actually write. I have a stamp for my autograph. I can sign my own name and make it a decent signature once in a blue moon. So at one point, I took a picture. There's a stamp you can get from Amazon. If you had take a picture of your signature, a good picture, they can make a stamp of it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I use to autograph my books. It is my signature. It did come from me. It's my signature. Um,
Yeah.
since I can't write it out by hand, at least I have the stamp. At least people can get an autograph. Um, the way that came to be, the way that came out, that's kind of how my stories come out. I just I just start writing and then I start fine tuning the writing and the lesson is there.
Mm.
I didn't even plan it. It's just how it came out. And yes, there are lessons in most every chapter, but it wasn't really something I planned. It's just apparently when I write, that's just, I guess that's just, it must be a part of the way I think, yeah. Because if it's not a part of how I think and feel, then how would it come out in the writing? I guess it's just what occurs to me in the moment of writing,
Yeah, yeah, right.
speaking.
Well, I think that's maybe a good place to stop. Um, so thank you, Jason, for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You as
Um,
well, Patrick. Thank you for having me.
yeah, and see you, everybody. If you liked the episode, please subscribe to see more content, and you could see my Patreon account for more exclusive content.